We learn many things from fairy tales. The Three Little Pigs taught us that hard work and dedication pays off. Cinderella taught us to believe in our dreams, and Pinocchio taught us never to lie. But have you ever heard of Bluebeard and the message he tries to portray to his poor wives? Well, I'm going to tell it, and then we're going to compare it to Belle Gunness, who's been nicknamed Lady Bluebeard due to the horrific crimes she has committed. This is definitely not a Disney story, but I'm not afraid to tell it here on Now You Know More. Please enjoy. Once upon a time, there was a wealthy nobleman who had a blue beard and had been married 6 times to beautiful women, all of whom mysteriously had vanished. He took notice to one of his neighbor's daughters and asked if he could have her hand in marriage. They were terrified of him, so he decided to throw a big party, and during the party, he was able to convince the young girl that he wasn't such a bad guy after all, and she agreed to marry him. Once they were wed, she moved in to live with him in his rich, luxurious palace in the countryside, away from her family. Red flag. About a month after the wedding, Bluebeard announced that he must leave to go on a long journey, and he gave the palace keys to his wife. He told her that she was able to open any room with them, each of which contained some of his riches, except for the underground chamber that he strictly forbade her to enter, or she would suffer his wrath. She eventually succumbs to her curiosity and enters the forbidden room, where she discovers the murdered corpses of Bluebeard's previous 6 wives hanging on hooks from the walls. Horrified, she drops the key in the blood and flees the room. She tries to wipe the blood stain off the key, but the key is magic, and the stain cannot be removed from it. Bluebeard unexpectedly returned home early to find the bloody key, and in a blind rage, he threatens to kill his wife on the spot. But she had asked him for one last prayer, buying herself just enough time for her siblings to show up as she previously invited them over. Just as Bluebeard was about to deliver the fatal blow, the young girl's sister and brothers appeared, and they were able to kill Bluebeard before he was able to harm her. The wife then inherited the fortune and the castle and had his 6 dead wives laid to rest. And that's the tale of Bluebeard. But what's the moral of the story? I do believe the teller wanted wives to be obedient or face the wrath of their husbands, but then that would contradict the fact that Bluebeard died and she got all of his money. So maybe the true moral of the story would be, just don't be a serial killer. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and if you could, please hit that like and subscribe button for me. Thank you so much. Now let's leave fairy tale land and get back to reality. Let's talk about Belle Gunness. She was a Norwegian-American serial killer who was active in Illinois and Indiana between 1884 and 1908. She had been given 2 nicknames, Hell's Belle and Lady Bluebeard. She is one of the worst people I have ever heard of. Belle was born in Norway in 1859. By the time she was 14 years old, she saved enough money from milking and raising cattle that she was able to move to the United States, and she settled in Chicago with her sister Nell, who had moved there several years prior. Belle was able to find work at a local butcher shop. It seems she had a knack for cutting up meat. In 1884, she met her husband Anton and opened a candy store together. Things were going really well until the candy shop and their home burned to the ground, but they were insured, so they got a decent settlement from the misfortune. But what really got the neighborhood talking wasn't the fire. It was the fact that Belle never seemed to have ever been pregnant, but yet she had 2 babies she claimed to have been hers. The children died from inflammation of the large intestine. This could have been a result of poisoning, but was never actually looked into. But Belle collected life insurance on the children, although we don't know how much. Then, in 1900, poor Anton complained to Belle that he had a headache, so she gave him medicine for the pain. When she checked on him a few hours later, he was dead. Belle was fortunate in this because he passed away on the same day that one life insurance policy was ending and a new one had begun, so she got paid out on both. She received a total of $5,000 for his death. That would be worth about $183,000 today. She used the money to move to LaPorte, Indiana, where she purchased a pig farm. And then she married her second husband, Peter, in 1902. A week later, Peter's infant daughter died of unknown causes when she was left in the care of Belle. The anguish of his daughter's death was short-lived, as Peter himself would pass away just 8 months later. Belle explained that he was reaching for something on a high shelf and a meat grinder fell onto him, smashing his skull. The coroner suspected murder, but the case was dismissed. Belle collected $3,000 for Peter's death, but she once again found herself to be alone. That is when she started placing ads in the paper seeking another husband. In 1905, a Wisconsin farmhand named Henry answered. He traveled to LaPorte to meet with Belle. Weeks later, he wrote to his family explaining that he was happy and decided to stay. That was the last time the family heard of him. When they reached out to Belle for an answer, she told them that he had moved to Chicago. Then, in 1906, John Moe of Minnesota came across Belle's ad. They wrote to each other for several months before he decided to meet her. It was found that he had withdrawn all of his money from the bank, and then he disappeared shortly after. Then, in April of 1908, the farmhouse in LaPorte, Indiana, caught fire and burned to the ground. As authorities searched through the ashes, they found 4 bodies, a headless woman, of whom they assumed was Belle, along with her 3 children. As they searched the rest of the property, they noticed soft depressions in the ground near the hog pen. When they dug into the depression, they found a sack full of which contained 2 hands, 2 feet, and 1 head. It was thought to be the remains of Andrew Helgling, another man who was instructed by Belle to move to LaPorte and to bring money with him. The police then turned their attention to the rest of the farm, where they noticed not just one soft impression, but many. Each one contained butchered body parts, legs, heads, torsos, feet, hands. They estimated it to be at least 11 mutilated bodies, but no one really knows for sure. And even though the story hit national news in 1908, not all of the men were able to be identified. By 1908, Ray Lamphere, Belle's hired hand farm, confessed that he knew Belle was placing advertisements seeking male companionship, but in reality she was robbing and murdering the men as they came to visit one by one. He had the unfortunate task of burying the bodies afterwards. He stated that Belle was warned by Axel Helgling that he was coming to investigate the disappearance of his brother Andrew. This prompted Belle to find a woman around the same body type as herself, and she decapitated the woman and instructed Ray to burn down the farm while she took the money and escaped. But they say that there's a second confession from Ray stating that he himself chopped up Belle and the kids and doused them in kerosene and set the home on fire. As much as we all would love to know that Belle reached this type of ending, it doesn't seem to be so. Even though Belle was pronounced dead, the doctor that performed the post-mortem investigation said that the headless body would have been 5 inches shorter than Belle and about 150 pounds lighter. In 2008, a DNA test was performed on the headless corpse, and they compared it to the DNA on the sample letter from Belle, but unfortunately the sample was way too old, and they were not able to confirm a match. Do you think Belle got away with it? I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Now, as far as the comparison between Belle Gunness and Bluebeard, you see, a lot of people call Belle Gunness Lady Bluebeard because it is believed that Belle Gunness murdered almost 20 of her love interests and at least 5 of her own children. Now you know. Thanks for listening.